Got it. Okay.
Great. Well, good afternoon or good morning. I think it's
It's
morning your
morning.
time here on the West Coast.
It is. It's a rain here.
That's great. Well, I'm Meg Weston, and my guest today is Faith Adiele. And Faith is an award-winning author and a professor, originally from Eastern Washington and now in the Bay Area. She speaks, teaches, writes, mentors people from around the world. She's the daughter of a Nigerian freedom fighter and a Nordic American student. She was born in a home for unwed mothers in Spokane, Washington, and raised on her grandparents' farm in the Yakima Valley, Washington. Her two memoirs are The Nigerian Nordic Girl's Guide to Lady Problems and Meeting Faith, the Thai Forest Journals of a Black Buddhist Nun. And that won the PEN Open Book Award. She has media credits on 2 episodes of the HBO Max series, A World of Calm, Sleep Stories, for the Calm app, and the PBS documentary, My Journey Home, which is about finding her father and siblings in Nigeria. Faith was educated at Harvard University, the Iowa Nonfiction Writing Program, and the Iowa Writers Workshop. She is the co-editor of Coming of Age Around the World, a multicultural anthology. Her essays on travel, family, mixed identity, race, and culture appear in periodicals such as O, the Oprah magazine, Essence, Transition, The Rumpus, and Huffington Post. And her work has been widely anthologized in Best Women's Travel Writing. She's an associate professor of creative nonfiction at California College of the Arts and on the core faculty of the Stone Coast MFA writing program here in Maine. Also teaches for the VONA workshops for writers of color. So a lot to talk about. There's so much. There's writing and creativity and identity and activism and spirituality and who knows what else, but travel,
Yes.
volcanoes. So I hope we have time for just a small portion of everything that you could share with us. So I'm going to start with a question. I listened to the Nigerian Nordic Girl's Guide to Lady Problems on my ride home from Pennsylvania last week. Riding in the car with my husband, we were laughing out loud and close to tears at times, this experience of being a college student of color in Iowa and navigating the healthcare system. So you recorded, I think, the audio version yourself?
I did with no preparation. They just said, we've booked this time, drive to this studio in Berkeley. And it was a chair, a table, like a little lamp, and then the sound engineer who's like a white man. And I had to read about my lady bits too.
Oh my God.
No audience, which I'm used to. And they hadn't told me how to read it to make it sound good. And I was so freaked out. And he's like, don't worry, my mother's a midwife.
That's great. I wasn't sure how my husband would react, and he loved it. He just loved it. You have such a wonderful sense of humor and authenticity in the style in your writing. I just, I can't wait to read more. I've started the Meeting Faith memoir myself. So
wonderful. Well, thank you. And thank your husband for being such a good sport.
Well, I wondered maybe we could just start off with you reading a selection from something you've written.
Okay, sure. As you know, I like to do lots of things. So I'm working on about 4 book projects. The one I've been working on the longest. And it's a memoir about finding my father and siblings in which was the basis of the PBS documentary. And then I've been working on it, on different aspects of it. There were 5 visits I made to Nigeria once I discovered my family. And this selection really relates to what I'm going to be doing in Maine later on. So it's from an essay called A Brief History of Air Disasters in Nigeria. I find my father wandering the dim parlor, dressed in undershirt and baggy shorts, a red vinyl placemat tucked beneath his arm. On a break from pilfering family photographs, I've now started pillaging his warping in the tropical heat library and have 3 prizes of my own beneath my arm. Caught, we each give a little start. I remind myself that it's okay. I belong here. Even if he were lucid, I have rights to the things I slip into my luggage. This time I found a history of Igbo life with a feels like it's talking about me, a Nigerian villager in 2 worlds. And a biography of Daddy's colleague, our most famous Igbo statesman, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, the first Governor General of independent Nigeria. Its title shrieks Zeke of New Africa in bold, optimistic font. Both books, nearly weight jackets crumbling at the edges, were published in London in the 60s and presented a decade later to the Honorable Commissioner of Education, Dr. Magnus Adiele, East Central State. The 3rd book is a gold embossed edition of Little Women, one of my mother's earliest blueprints for feminism. She read it aloud to me as a childlike scripture. Why in the world is Little Women in the personal library of Nigeria's former Commissioner of Education? Upon seeing me, my father cocks his head, a gesture resembling my sister's goats, who have sniffed me out as foreign and wait for me around every pound wall, curious heads stacked in a row. Shall I speak English or French? He queries. English, please, sir. Ah, then you must be the doctor. Was the edge of the placemat. To get this book open, he complains, fumbling with the thick vinyl. I catch my breath to keep from crying. And then suddenly he shivers and flashes me a look of delight. Today, I find out about my JAM, which is short for Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board. Will you wait with me? And just like that, we time travel together. I, the stranger doctor-daughter who missed sharing 26 years of her own milestones. Now I'm finally able to join my 73 going on 18-year-old father and wait for the results to his university entrance exams. We take a seat on the plastic-covered settee that squeaks beneath us and grin at each other. My father ducks his head and smiles shyly. I hope I make it. My stepmother, who is shuffling past the open door, overhears. No, Daddy, no, she pleads tearfully. Remember, you went to university in London and America, graduate school in Canada, and got a PhD. You've been teaching at the University of Nigeria for, remember? You were Commissioner of Education for the entire region before they split the Igbos up. You made it the whole way. God is great. He nods politely, and when she is finished, turns back to me. If I get my admission, can we have cake? I take the tiny dry hand of the man who has been, will become my father. I certainly don't see why not, sir. I knocked my brother squirreled all over this joint. That's the end.
Wow. Wonderful, wonderful. And I can't wait to talk more about the objects and how that relates to your workshop, but we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that. What an experience to write about.
Yeah, I probably should have mentioned that the last time I went to see my father, he had amnesia, he had Alzheimer's. So it was like I lost him all over again. He had no idea who I was.
Right. And I love the way you put that in there, you know, so subtly. There was just the word lucid in a sentence, and then you went on. And it was enough to clue us in. You know, I think you said something like, even if my father was lucid, I had a right to these things. So it just clued us into the whole situation of what you were dealing with. Beautiful subtlety in your writing. I want to ask you about your genre. It's nonfiction and essays and memoir, and people have called it creative nonfiction. Would you tell us what that is and why
Yeah,
you choose to write in that genre.
I love it. I'm like an evangelist for creative nonfiction or literary nonfiction. I love it so much. And I think it's because, as you can tell, I like a lot of things, and it's really hard for me to focus on one. I just have lots of interests, and I think it's a result of being multiracial and multicultural and national. I never like really want to focus on one particular thing. And when I was younger, I was a poet, but then I had these extremely kind of complicated experiences that were happening. And I was also really interested in studying the social sciences and anthropology. And when I was kind of looking, I was writing these really complex, after I met my father, I was writing these really complex poems that had history and mythology and family stories. And my friends actually had an intervention. They're like, you need less coffee and more sentences. Like, your poetry is giving us a headache, and you should really cut down on caffeine. So I was like, I need a new genre. And in looking around, I thought this beautiful thing that's creative nonfiction, because it takes all of the things that we associate with traditional nonfiction. So like journalism, social sciences, argumentation, experts, history, research, all of those things I love, the things that we associate with ethos and logos. And it balances it with all the things with the creative art, figurative language and metaphor and pathos and creating characters and emotion and beauty of language. And so I love the complexity of having to balance what I call the head and the heart in kind of getting a story across. And there are three major kind of areas. There's literary journalism, which does journalism, but you can create characters and go deep. It's not just, the what, where happened, the who, what, where, it's the why. So you have more context. Or you can do memoir, which is, making meaning out of your memories and thinking of the larger universal themes that connect to other people. Or you can go the essay route, which is taking a traditional essay, which is, kind of arguing for something to kind of change someone's mind or nuance or understanding, but you can use personal narrative as part of the data, along with all the other kind of data you would do. So it's these three opportunities under the umbrella of creative nonfiction to really balance head and heart in a way that's just so satisfying. Because if it's all heart, you can kind of feel emotionally manipulated. And if it's all head, it feels kind of dry, like, I could just get this from a pamphlet. But if you can do that beautiful thing of, going back and forth between head and heart and anticipating what your audience needs to really, really go with you on this journey, it can be so fantastic. And I actually feel that it's really key to the process of democracy, to the democratic project, because it allows anyone to kind of insert their into the national narrative and kind of change who gets to create history and whose voices matter.
I love it. I have an MFA degree in creative nonfiction
Oh, great.
from Lesley University, and I've never heard it so well described. People would ask me and I'd say, well, maybe it's lying. I don't know. But it's beautiful. And I've just recently gotten into poetry because of the time creative nonfiction takes, the
Yes.
research and so could you talk a little bit about your creative practice and process? Do you write every day? Do you write morning pages? Do you write for half the day? What's your...
I'm a bad person to talk about this, because if I did have more discipline, I would certainly have many more books finished. Because I'm always working on tons of projects. And because I tend to write books, and you can get really overwhelmed by that, or just kind of feel that no one cares. And so I do short work. I do essays, I do articles. Lately, I've even been doing like art profiles and just views. So I like doing this shorter work too, because of course, then you finish something, you get immediate gratification. And also, I noticed, like, during the pandemic, during lockdown, it was really hard for me to have the extended focus to do my book projects. And so I would just write these little essays about things around me. And I was like, I got nothing to say. But every single time I sat down, like, all of these things would happen and, would come together. And it was still the themes that I was always interested in. It was just the plot was a little different because it was, life under COVID. But it was like, oh, these are, I'm always interested in kind of race and intersectionality and the humor and tragedy, and all of these sorts of things. And I've gone through doing morning pages. And I think that's a great practice. I do think ritual is really important. And so I try to put things in place that trick to doing the ritual. So I have a writing partner who I meet with once a week. We're both on academic schedules and we try to line up. So there's one day that we can write together. We don't share our work, but we're there together in community. And I would never stand her. I would stand up myself for my own writing. I work with this organization called A Very Important Meeting, and I lead, anyone can sign up for an hour during the week, and it's 10 minutes of meditation and 5 minutes of writing, and then just optional kind of fellowship for 15 minutes after, and that's online. And I lead 2 of those. So it makes sure on Monday and Tuesday mornings, I'm at my chair. The meditation helps us drop into the writing space more quickly and do writing. So I've got that in there. I have a writing group that, once a month I have to give them, large number of pages, a chapter or a couple of essays. So there are all these things I put in place. And then during the summer, I try to go away to writer's residency. I'm really a binge writer. I'm someone, it's kind of hard for me to write and then stop, on a daily practice. I really like to go all in where I've got no distractions and I'm living off Cheetos and not combing my hair and just like really deep in it, particularly for book projects, which take so much kind of psychic and emotional energy.
I love that description of being a binge writer. That's great because we're not all that disciplined,
Yeah.
I think I listened to an interview you did with Julia Cameron.
Yes.
And she has those disciplines that you're supposed to do every day.
For her, morning page is the answer to everything. It was hilarious because every question someone asked, she was like, well, you wouldn't have that problem if you did morning pages. I'm like, oh, she really believes it.
Yeah, but we're not all her, right?
We are not all her.
That's great. So you also teach this memoir and creative nonfiction. Can you talk to us a little bit about your teaching philosophy or your approach to teaching?
Yeah, I teach a lot. Which is funny because, my father was commissioner of education and my mother's, a lifelong middle school teacher. And I swore I would never become a teacher. But I see it as part of my service, really. I was mentored by so many kind of incredible, strong, particularly women when I was coming up and when I was getting into writing, and some men too. And that one-on-one guidance of a mentor was so kind of transformative for me that, it's the way I want to give back. I want, literary citizenship is really important to me. And because I came to teaching as a second career, I had already been like a social justice activist and community educator. So I was already doing things in my community. And I realized that storytelling was really how we achieved this work, that whenever we had to make kind of big decisions, people would tell kind of a story about where they came from and what mattered to them. And I was like, oh, here I've been thinking I would be indulgent if I studied writing. And like, as the daughter of immigrants, you're trained to do something really useful and not pursue art. And that actually gave me the courage to go back to graduate school after already having a career and saying, I do want to do writing, which is my first love, and I want to do it in service of a better world. And so I approach a lot of my writing practices come from things I used when I was doing that work. And so it's all about helping you find your voice, helping you find your purpose, not cramming a particular philosophy down our throats. I think just now people are starting to wake up, but I've been talking about this for 20 years, that the pedagogy we have for teaching creative writing and even the way we define what good stories is very, very Western. And so it comes with a patriarchy, it comes with white supremacy embedded in it, it comes with Western shapes of storytelling, which are very kind of linear. I would see people, because I memoir, I'd see a lot of people who have trauma, and the shape of a trauma story is much different than kind of the linear, easily resolved thing. There's a circular nature to it. Very interested in kind of oral storytelling. And so I always try to figure out what is someone's natural storytelling voice and help them get the tools for that to come forward, not to cram themselves or into a predetermined box, but really help give them the tools to do what it is they want to do. And if it's going to create something a little more complex to read, how do you then teach your readers? So it's really people to read widely and be better global citizens in how they give feedback and have more kind of confidence in what comes natural to them and how they want to highlight that to have a particular effect.
It's wonderful to think about teaching as service and storytelling as, important work for us. And you talked about helping people find their own voice, but that doesn't sound easy. I mean, we've all been educated, with certain expectations, and those creative or those writing teachers that made all the red pen marks on our papers.
Yes.
And I would say that it might be the most difficult work you can do.
It is. And I'm also asking people to be really honest with themselves too. Like oftentimes memoir can seem really seductive. You're like, it's about me and what's more fascinating than me, but then you have to really, like, you can't withhold. I'm only going to show the heroic parts, or I'm only going to, or I remember when I was, first starting to write Meeting Faith, I was just like, I'm just going to start in the temple. For some reason, there's this half Black girl who's ordained in the Buddhist temple. We'll just start from here, and I remember I was talking to an agent. She's like, but why are you there? And I'm like, you don't need to know that, because I didn't want to revisit that, so memoir requires absolute honesty. You have to look at yourself. You have to look at your family of origin. You have to look at the things you've lived through. And so I'm asking people to do something really hard. And so I also want to be really careful that they're taking care of themselves. And they're, I've also been in places where if the group is not a safe group, some really damaging stuff can happen. So that's why I also want to give them control. Don't just give someone your work and say, tell me if it's worthwhile or not. Don't give away your power. Know when to, put some boundaries there, and then also realize you're going to have to walk up close and look at yourself. So that can be dangerous because students can start to open something up, they don't like it, and then they get mad at me. Or they don't like other people's responses, or other people don't know how to respond. So I spend a lot of time building a safer community, kind of give people tools to not hurt and not let themselves be hurt too, because it is really hard work, which is why I'm always saying no to. I get many more teaching requests than I can say yes to.
Well, I can imagine that you do, because you sound like a wonderful teacher, and you bring so much to your own stories, and so you have such a wide range of interests as well. And I wanted to ask you about, you're also a travel writer, and you work with travel writers of color. Can you talk to us about travel writing?
Yeah. Well, I don't do it in the traditional sense. I think most people think of travel writing as like, the service writing, like guides and things for magazines about telling you where to go. But I think because I come from such an international, I realized that the definition of travel writing didn't satisfy me. It seemed to be that it was all about this kind of elite leisure travel, and it involved kind of thinking of Europe or North America as the center, and then going to the other and looking at things and then coming back. And I'm like, but wait, people from the global South are the ones who are traveling the most. We're just not necessarily calling it travel, because it's about relocating or migrating or being forced to leave, or, for me, like roots journeys, going to my father's homeland, going to my mother's homeland. And that kind of stuff is not necessarily in the literature. And I thought, travel literature travel is very much like spiritual narrative, which, my first memoir was that. And it's very much like memoir. It's like you leave your home and you go out into the world and encounter teachers as well as challenges that you kind of have to do battle with. And then you move through the unknown world, and then you return home to the known world, but something has changed. Either home has changed or you have changed. So it's really the hero's journey. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the hero's journey is spiritual narrative, is memoir, is travel writing. Every kind of big done has been around travel. I'm going to have to make the travel industry redefine what is travel writing. So I just started saying that I was a travel writer. And, as a person of color writing memoir, that meant I was always negotiating different cultures. I was always moving. One of the most dramatic events for me was moving from my small town in Eastern Washington to going to college in New England. That was more shocking to me than being an exchange student in Thailand my junior year. Like culturally, that was more shocking for me and harder for me to adapt. So I was like, these fascinating journeys that happen all the time. So I started, submitting bits of my memoir to travel magazines. And then I started the first travel writing workshop for writers of color in the US to try to help people know that their journeys are the stuff of literature, and then to partner with different kind of visionary travel magazines and podcasts and reading series, and saying, do you want to hear what these really amazing young folks of color are doing in terms of travel?
Wow. It sounds like you're very much a groundbreaker, to starting things that haven't been done before, doing things that haven't been done before, and that your interests are so varied and wide. And how do you prioritize those things? And how do you decide what's most important for you to do or write
Right.
about or whatever?
Well, clearly finishing my books is not a priority. So for one thing, if I get a travel experience, that's always number one. If I get the opportunity to travel, I'm gone.
All
My
right.
husband might be like, what? Wait, she was just here. And I'm like, I get to travel. So that's number one priority. And then from there, yeah, it's kind of hard, but I feel that everything, one, if you tell me I can't do something, I want to do it. And then I feel that each one of those things that's opened the door to something else. And you just have to be aware of what's going on. So like, for example, when the lockdown happened, all of my travel writing stuff dried up. And I was like, oh my gosh. And, and I had these residencies in Europe, able to go. I was like locked in this room. I was like, oh, I'm going to go nuts. And then I decided to sign up for this travel sketch workshop. I don't know how to draw. Worst person in the class. It was super traumatic. But I really loved it. We really connected around how you travel and kind of the importance of looking carefully. And she ended up recommending me to the Calm app to write, Calm stories. And then they ended up recommending me to HBO to write for HBO. I'd never done either of those kinds of writing, but it was super exciting. And so that took the place of what I would have been doing, my usual out traveling. And so just saying yes to everything, even if you don't know how to do it, then leads to the next thing. And so I let the universe decide what my next priority is going to be.
I love that. And I so relate to that philosophy in life. I really do. But I can't imagine you writing for something called the Calm app.
It's hilarious. And I love it.
So much energy.
I know. And I get edited. They don't edit me for the writing. They edit me for sleepiness. I have a sleepy editor.
Thank you so much, Faith. It's just been such a pleasure to talk to you. And I can't wait to experience more of you when you come to Maine Media. So
thank you for your wonderful questions. And great. I really appreciate it.
Good. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.